The JBL Partybox Essential is a great little box speaker that packs a very big punch in a very small package. And for most people, I feel that this speaker is going to have no problem delivering. But if you're looking for something durable and portable to constantly take on the go with you, the Encore will get the job done. But today we're going to compare the Encore up to the Boombox 2 XG500 and the UE Hyperboom. Now, when it comes to price, the Encore Essential has a retail price of $300. Not bad, but so that there isn't any confusion, there's also the Partybox Encore in the pipeline, which is going to retail for $400. And basically, this speaker is going to have a longer battery life and extended light feature, and it's going to come included with 2 mics. But honestly, at $400, I think you should just go with the 110 if you can find it. But then there are all of these other speakers which are a little more expensive than the Encore Essential. The Hyperboom has a retail price of $450, and both the Boombox 2 and XG500 have a retail price of $500. So the Encore does undercut all of these other speakers by a good amount. Nonetheless, if you want to pick any of these speakers up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch shelf down below. I've made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And if you've been watching me for a while, you know I can be very particular. So I'll only set my name on something that I'm really proud of. Now, first let's talk about the design of these speakers. Now, all of these speakers are fairly small, and coincidentally, they all weigh in at 13 pounds. So they're all very easy to take on the go with you. But one specific thing that I like about both the Encore and Hyperboom are their square designs. These speakers aren't going to roll around in the trunk of your car while you're driving, like both the Boombox 2 and XG500 do. But even though the Encore is very portable, it's nowhere near as durable as these other speakers. Now, all of these speakers have varying degrees of water resistance, and the XG500 is officially dust resistant as well. So a little rain or getting splashed on isn't going to be a problem for any of these speakers. But the Encore is rocking some relatively soft plastic, so it does love to collect scratches, and the metal grill on the front is pretty thin. Whereas with all of these other speakers, they all have fabric wrap bodies that can take a beating. So with these other speakers, you don't have to baby them as much. So overall, all of these speakers are just more durable than the Encore, which could be very important if you plan on constantly taking your speaker to the park or beach. Now, don't get me wrong, the Encore will get the job done, but it's not my first pick. But the Encore would be my first pick if I was looking for a speaker for my man cave. The light feature on the Encore is very impressive, and you have a few different lighting modes to choose from. And this light feature is going to look great either indoors or outdoors at night. Now, the XG500 is the only other speaker here that also has a built-in light feature, but to be honest, since this light feature is tucked in the passive radiators of the speaker, it's very hard to see. So personally, I never use the light feature on the XG500, and instead, I just enjoy the extended battery life. Now, when it comes to battery life, the XG500 has an advertised battery life of 30 hours, but that's with the speaker playing at 50% volume with the light feature turned off, but with its mega bass feature turned on, which is good. And under similar circumstances, the Boombox 2 and Hyperboom both have an advertised battery life of 24 hours. However, real-world use with the XG500 playing at 80% volume with the light feature turned off, but with its mega bass feature turned on, it's good for a very healthy 10 hours of playback time. And under similar circumstances, the Hyperboom is good for about 8.5 hours of playback time, and the Boombox 2 is good for about 7 hours of playback time. So overall, all of these speakers are going to have no problem keeping up with you on a single charge, but the Sony does have the best stamina here. But then there's the Encore Essential, which has an advertised battery life of 6 hours, and that's with the speaker playing at 65% volume, which is a really good listening volume while outdoors, but it's not as loud as 80% volume on these other speakers, with the light feature turned off and with this bass boost feature turned off as well. But real-world use with the Encore Essential playing at 80% volume with the light feature turned on and with its bass boost feature set to punchy, which is the second level of bass boost, I'm only getting about 3 hours of playback time out of this speaker. So if battery life is very important to you, then the Encore Essential just can't keep up with you like these other speakers can. But now let's talk about ports. Now both the Encore Essential and Sony XG500 has a single 1/4 inch input. So if you want, you can plug in a microphone, whereas this is something that these other two speakers just don't have. Now, the Hyperboom does have an optical port, so if you want, you can use it as a soundbar with your TV. But personally, I think karaoke is more important for a speaker like this. Now, continuing on the topic of ports, all of these speakers have an audio jack, so you can use them with a wired connection as you should. And all of these speakers also have USB-A ports, so you can plug in your own devices and charge them up if you really must. But with both the Encore Essential and XG500, you can plug in a USB stick and play music off of it. Now, personally, I think it's great and all that all of these speakers have USB-A ports, but I still really wish that these speakers had a USB-C port. Now, when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, all of these speakers can be connected to two devices at the same time, so you and a friend can both be DJ. None of these speakers have any latency issues, so if you're going to watch any movies or videos with any of these speakers, your audio and visual will be in sync. And when it comes to audio codecs, both the Boombox 2 and Hyperboom only have support for SBC, whereas the Encore Essential have support for SBC and AAC. But then there's the XG500, which has support for SBC, AAC, and Sony's own LDAC. But now let's talk about sound. Regarding speaker setups, the Encore has a single front-mount firing woofer and dual front-mount firing tweeters. But the Encore also has a rear-firing exhaust port. So with this speaker, you can amplify its bass by simply placing it up against a wall. But then there's the Boombox 2 and XG500, which both have dual front-mount firing woofers, dual front-mount firing tweeters, and dual passive radiators that shoot out the sides. So with both of these speakers, you can amplify their bass if you place them in a corner. And finally, there's the Hyperboom, which also has dual front-mount firing woofers and dual front-mount firing tweeters, but its passive radiators shoot out the back. So you can also amplify its bass by placing it up against a wall. But now we're going to jump into the sound test. All of these speakers are playing while at 80% volume. Both the Boombox 2 and Hyperboom are playing with their stock EQs, whereas the XG500 is playing with its Mega Bass feature turned on, and the Encore is playing with its bass boost set to deep.
Oh, I got lost on the way to you in an orange sky by the ocean blue. Every my soul renewed, taken by the sunrise and the golden view. Walking slowly in the mountains underneath the constellations. Yeah, I know that you've been waiting for me. Time is losing all its meaning, like I'm living in a dream, and I've been chasing all the feelings I need. It's in these moments with words unspoken, my
Now first I have to point out that the XG500 has a much warmer sound signature compared to all of these other speakers. So the XG500 can sound a little shallow at times, whereas all of these other speakers do a better job of putting an emphasis on the mids, so vocals are more pronounced. Now sound signature wise, the Encore and Boombox 2 are very similar to one another. However, the Boombox 2 has much better instrument separation than the Encore. So the Boombox 2 sounds much more open than the Encore. And then there's the Hyperboom, which I feel sounds a little more open than the Boombox 2, and it also has a little more bass. Now, while the Encore is playing with its bass boost set to deep, it does have a little less physicality in its bass than all of these other speakers. However, if you were to use the speaker with its bass boost set to punchy, or the second level of bass boost, the Encore will have more bass than these other speakers. But the speaker just won't sound as open as all of these other speakers. So if your main priority is bass, then the Encore can deliver when its bass boost is set to punchy. And if you're really crazy, you can go in and raise the bass through its customizable EQ. Plus, have bass boost turned on and it's gonna have even more bass. But if you do this, it's gonna sound super shallow, but it is an option. Now, with both the Hyperboom and XG500, you can also customize their EQ to your liking if you want. The Boombox 2 is the only speaker here where you can't customize its EQ. And I don't think the Boombox 2 is going to get a customizable EQ anytime soon because JBL is probably saving that feature for the upcoming Boombox 3. But then there's max volume performance on these speakers. When they're running off of their internal batteries, the Hyperboom gets the loudest here, closely followed by the Boombox 2. But then there's the Encore and XG500, which just don't get as loud as these other speakers when they're running off of their internal batteries. The XG500 doesn't get as loud because of its warmer sound signature, and the Encore just doesn't get as loud. But nonetheless, all of these speakers get decently loud. But with all of these speakers, except the Hyperboom, if you were to use them while they're plugged in, you're going to get a performance boost out of them. They're going to get a little louder and they're going to have more bass. And when the Encore is plugged in, it gets just as loud as the Boombox 2 when it's plugged in as well. And the XG500 does a good job of keeping up as well, even with its warmer sound signature. But the Hyperboom still manages to inch ahead of all of these speakers when it comes to max volume. So overall, if you're looking for the speaker here with the best sound quality and the best instrument separation, I still maintain the Hyperboom is the way to go. But finally, let's talk about pairing these speakers up with other speakers. Now, Sony's speaker pairing protocol is the most accommodating here. You can pair your XG500 either up to another XG500, or you can pair it up to some of Sony's larger box speakers, like either an XP500 or an XP700, or you can also pair it up to an XB43, XB33, or to an XB23, and you can pair up to 100 speakers together, which is obviously unnecessary. Now, even though Sony's speaker pairing protocol is the most accommodating here, it's not my favorite. Sometimes all of your speakers don't get paired up, and sometimes you will hear skipping in your music, but it works when it does. But then there's UE's Party Up, which works very well. Now you can pair your Hyperboom up to another Hyperboom, or up to a Mega Boom 3, or up to a Boom 3, and you can have up to 150 speakers paired together, which is obviously unnecessary. But more importantly, Party Up is much easier to use. Your speakers get paired up very quickly, and skipping is not an issue. And then there are JBL speaker pairing protocols, which are also very easy to use and they're very stable, but there is some major fragmentation to keep in mind here. Now, with JBL's smaller, more portable speakers that are using Party Boost, you can only pair them up to other speakers that are also using Party Boost. So if you've got a Boombox 2, you can only pair it up to another Boombox 2, or to a Boombox 3, or to a Pulse 5, a Pulse 4, or to a Charge 5, or a Flip 6, or Flip 5, or any other speaker that's using Party Boost, and you can pair up to 100 speakers together. But you cannot pair a Party Boost speaker to a Partybox speaker. So if you've got a Boombox 2, you can't wirelessly connect it to an Encore Essential. You can only pair your Encore up to another Encore, or to a 110, 310, or to a 710, and you can only have up to 2 Party Boxes wirelessly paired together, which personally I feel is just not enough. Now, even though JBL's TWS is very easy to use and it's very stable, I still just really wish JBL would just bring Party Boost to their Partybox speakers. But with all that being said, the JBL Partybox Essential is a little speaker that packs a very big punch. It's got a ton of bass, it's got a great looking light feature, and you can plug in a microphone into it if you want. The main drawback with the Encore is that it doesn't have the longest battery life out there, and it's not super durable. But the Partybox Encore Essential does give you a big bang for your buck. But still, there is merit if you're thinking about getting one of these other more premium speakers. They're all much more durable and they all have much better battery life. And both the Hyperboom and Boombox 2 have much better SMS separation and sound much more open than the Encore. Now personally, I recommend that you pick up the Hyperboom if you want the speaker here with the best sound. The XG500 is a great pick if battery life is very important to you. And if you plan on getting multiple speakers and you want to pair them up together on a regular basis, then the Boombox 2 is my top pick. But just remember, the Boombox 3 is confirmed for summer 2022. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit the like button and get subscribed. If you want to pick any of the products up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch. I made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And you know I can be very particular, so I'll only slap my name on something if I'm really proud of it.